Point is going to be on Sigmund Freud's theory of psychoanalysis. Sigmund Freud was born in 1856 and died in 1939. His father was strict and authoritarian. Freud always felt hostile and anger toward his father. Freud's mother was attractive and was very protective and loving towards Freud, especially because he was her first son. Among Freud's lifeline personality, he possessed a great amount of self-confidence, a strong will to succeed, as well as dreams of glory and fame. From a young age, Freud exhibited a high level of intelligence, and his parents helped him with it.
Freud started high school a year earlier than the average student and was typically always ahead of his class. He was fluent in multiple languages such as German, Hebrew, Latin, Greek, French, and English. While in school, Freud taught himself Italian and Spanish. Freud had also many interests growing up, but when it came time to choosing a profession, he decided to settle with medicine. After high school, Freud experimented with cocaine. He fell in love with it because it eased his depression and chronic indigestion. Therefore, he recommended it to everyone, and later he wrote about cocaine's beneficial effects. Freud, in his article, were later accused of being a major contributor to the epidemic of cocaine use.
Freud graduated at the University of Vienna with a doctorate degree in medicine. Since Freud didn't have an independent income, he decided to start a private practice as a clinical neurologist and began his exploration of the personalities of people suffering from emotional disorders. When he finally had enough money, Freud married Martha Bernays. Later, Freud studied in Paris with Jean-Martin Charcot while researching the use of hypnosis and hysteria. When working with Charcot, Freud was altered to the possible sexual basis of neurosis.
Although Freud emphasized the importance of sex in emotional life, he experienced several sexual conflicts. He had a negative attitude towards sex. He even wrote about the dangers of sex and stated that it contaminated both the mind and the body. Due to Freud's personal conflicts of sex, he experienced a neurotic episode at 40 years old. He diagnosed himself with anxiety neurosis and neurasthenia. Freud proposed that the episode was caused from the accumulation of sexual tension.
Freud developed a psychoanalytic practice. He psychoanalyzed himself through the study of his dreams. Throughout this process, Freud realized how much hostility he felt towards his father and recalled his childhood sexual longings for his mother. He formulated much of this theory around his own neurotic conflicts and childhood experiences.
Freud became known through his work. People recognized his work through articles and books. Freud attracted a group of disciples who met with him once a week to learn about his new system. Carl Jung and Alfred Adler were a part of this group, and later broke ties with Freud to develop their own theories.
Freud stated that instincts were mental representations of internal stimuli that drive a person to take certain actions. He believed that instincts were the basic elements of the personality, and that they were the motivating forces that drive behavior as well as determine its direction. Freud states that instincts are a form of energy, also known as transformed physiological energy, that connects the needs of the body with the wishes of the mind. Freud's theory is a homeostatic approach where we are motivated to restore and maintain a condition of physiological equilibrium, or balance, to keep the body free of tension.
Freud developed two types of instincts, life instincts and death instincts. Life instincts serve a purpose of survival by seeking to satisfy the need for food, water, air, and sex. They are oriented towards growth and development. Freud theorizes that the psychic energy manifested by life instincts is the libido, and it can be attached to objects, which is called cathexis. Death instincts, on the other hand, is the unconscious drive towards decay, destruction, and aggression. Freud believed that people have an unconscious wish to die. One component of the death instincts is the aggressive drive, which he saw as the wish to die turned against objects other than the self.
Freud divided personality into three levels: the conscious, the unconscious, and the preconscious. Freud resembles these to an iceberg. The conscious is the tip of the iceberg because it includes all the sensations of which we are aware at any given moment. Freud considered the conscience to be a limited aspect of personality. The unconscious is the material just beneath the surface. It's the focus of psychoanalytic theory and contains the major driving power behind all behaviors. The preconscious is a material well below the surface and is the storehouse of all of our memories, perceptions, and thoughts of which we are not consciously aware at the moment, but we can easily summon into consciousness.
Freud expanded his theory on the levels of personality and came up with the structure of personality: the id, the ego, and superego. The id is the reservoir for the instincts and libido. It is the source of psychic energy. The id operates in accordance with the pleasure principle, which strives for immediate satisfaction and avoids pain. The id also has no awareness of reality. The ego is the rational master of personality. It operates in accordance with the reality principle, which means that it provides appropriate constraints on the expression of the id instincts. The superego is a powerful and largely unconscious set of dictates or beliefs that is usually learned by the ages 5 or 6, initially consisting the rules of conduct set down by our parents. There are two parts of the superego: conscience and the ego ideal. The conscience is formed by the behaviors for which children are punished, while the ego ideal is formed by the behaviors for which children are praised. The superego strives neither for pleasure nor for attainment of realistic goals, but it strives solely for moral perfection.
Here is a representation of the iceberg including Freud's levels of personality as well as structure of personality. You can see the id, ego, and superego as it relates to the conscious, preconscious, and unconscious.
Freud described anxiety as a fear without an obvious cause. Freud made anxiety an important part of his personality theory, asserting that it's fundamental to the development of all neurotic and psychotic behavior. Freud proposed 3 different types of anxiety: reality anxiety, neurotic anxiety, and moral anxiety. Reality anxiety involves real fears of the real world. Neurotic anxiety involves a conflict between the id and the ego. The fear is not of the instinct themselves, but of the results when gratifying the instincts. Moral anxiety involves the conflict between the id and superego. You are motivated to express an instinctual impulse that is contrary to your moral code, but you receive feelings of guilt or shame.
Several defense mechanisms against anxiety. They all share 2 characteristics. They're all denials or distortions of reality, and they all operate unconsciously. We're unaware of them, which means on the unconscious level we hold distorted or unreal images of our world and ourselves. Repression is the most fundamental and frequently used defense mechanism. It's an involuntary removal of something from conscious awareness. Denial is related to repression and involves denying the existence of some external threat or traumatic event that has occurred. Reaction formation involves us defending ourselves against a disturbing impulse by actively expressing the opposite impulse. Projection is another way of defending against disturbing impulses, but by projecting them onto someone else. Regression involves the person retreating or regressing to an earlier period of life that was more pleasant and free of the current level of frustration and anxiety. Rationalization is a defense mechanism that involves reinterpreting our behavior to make it more rational and acceptable. Displacement involves us shifting the id impulses to another object. Sublimation involves finding a substitute object to satisfy the impulses rather than shifting it to another object.
Freud believed that all behaviors are defensive, but that not everyone uses the same defenses in the same way. Freud noted that each region of the body assumed a greater importance as the center of conflict at a different age, which is where Freud derived his theory of psychosexual stages of development. Each stage includes a conflict that must be resolved before moving on to the next stage. The oral stage lasts from birth just until before the 2nd year. In this stage, the mouth is the primary erogenous zone where pleasure is derived from the mouth. The anal stage lasts from just after the 1st year all the way through the 3rd year. This stage involves toilet training, and this is where the gratification is derived from defecation. The phallic stage arises between the 4th and 5th year. This stage includes the Oedipus complex, castration anxiety, and penis envy. The latency stage is formed from age 5 till puberty. This is where the child solidifies relationships among them and develop their sex instinct. The genital stage is the final stage, which derives from adolescence till adulthood. This includes the development of their sex role and identity.
Freud had a pessimistic view on human nature. He believed that we are constantly battling our inner forces. His ultimate and necessary goal in life was to reduce tension. Freud also recognized universality in human nature, where we all pass through the same stages of psychosexual development. He held a deterministic view, meaning that everything we do is predetermined by our life and death instincts. Therefore, Freud believed that personality is determined by early childhood interactions. And that sums up Freud's psychoanalytic theory.